Hi, everybody. So, no intro this time because I'm not sure what is happening with my computer, but Google Chrome keeps crashing, and there's an option to report something like that, but then it just closes down. So, I tried uninstalling, reinstalling, I've tried everything, and it's not working. So I am using Microsoft Edge, which I dislike very much, but I will do this until I can figure out what is wrong with Chrome because it was working fine yesterday and now it's not working. So thank you everyone for being patient with me and my computer. I am going to start this press conference again. It did start at 5 p.m. So I am going to start this press conference. Sorry about that. And we will listen to it in its entirety. I know, Edge is terrible. I have no idea what's going on with Google Chrome. Not one bit.
For starters, let me just say, for the consideration of the 4 deaf victims and their family, we are requesting that the ASL interpreter is in all frames for language access here in Maine and the U.S. They are grieving and have a right to know the latest info in ASL. You can see we've changed this a little bit, the kind of the setup from earlier today. And again, as we continue to evolve, right? Lots of podiums. We got to lost our maps. The whole thing was a little bit of a mess earlier, to be quite honest. And our victims in this investigation, the people that are doing the work, deserve better than that. So I would also tell you that we're kind of looking for a larger venue as well. The chains here and everything else seems to work. We're going to use some technology for some pictures here right off the bat. So I would say that, again, thank you for joining us. It's been a busy day for our law enforcement officers and our partners around the state. I'm going to give some updates from what we found, but the real primary reason I wanted to bring you back in today was we wanted to really identify the victims and show their pictures. We won't get into family backgrounds and their lineage at all, but we do want to show those pictures, give ages. I would say that the families didn't want hometowns listed. They do certainly deserve and want some privacy around these issues, which makes complete sense. And we're going to start with that component of our information simply because that's why we're here, right? This is about the victims. That's why we do what we do. And that's why we're striving so hard. And that's why you're here because you care about them as well. So we're going to go ahead and load that behind us here on the screen. And I think Shannon Moss can also put that information out following this. Some specifics here, I would just like to note that the families actually approved these photos, sent these photos in to us for a lot of different reasons. I think some of them show a little bit of character, a little bit of relationships, and some other specifics. You'll just see again a picture, a name, an age, and then there's a couple symbols there. And we wanted to be specific enough to what location they ultimately lost their lives at. And again, thank the families for allowing us to even do this. They certainly didn't need to do that. They're working through their own struggles, and rightfully so. So I'm going to start with this and then ask for just a moment of silence before we continue on to our next agenda item. But that top left, as you see it, and that is Ronald G. Morin, 55. And I won't read the venues. You can put that all together yourself. Peyton Brewer Ross, 40 years of age. Joshua A. Seal, 36 years of age. Brian M. McFarland, 41 years of age. Joseph Lawrence Walker, 57. Arthur Fred Stewart, 42. Max A. Hathaway, 35. Stephen M. Vozella, 45. Thomas Ryan Conrad, 34. Michael R. Deloria II, 51. Jason Adam Walker, 51. Tricia C. Asselin, 53. William A. Young, 44. Aaron Young, 14, his son. Robert E. Violet, 76, and his wife, Lucille M. Violet, 73. William Frank Brackett, 48 years of age. Keith D. McNair, 64. Just have a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you for that. Truly, truly appreciate it. And we do, again, appreciate that to the family. They did give us those photos. I did not, however, have any of the family members pronounce any of those last names. So certainly no disrespect intended if in any way screwed up the pronunciation. So to move on, I would also like to address numbers of the victims that I confirmed earlier today with the number 8. And I will tell you that's miscommunication on my part. I was wrong. In talking to our detectives, we had a list for people that had been identified and family members that had been notified. There's also a separate list that involved family advocacy and whether or not they had been plugged into that. So the reality here is that all 18 of those victims, everybody that we listed here today, everybody has been identified and their families have been notified. So we were in contact with them. I would expect some more information later tonight, and I'll definitely talk about it tomorrow morning at 10, reference to Family Information Center, a new location, and some material around that, exactly what services will be available at that particular time. But I definitely wanted to make sure that I correct that mistake from earlier. So several other updates from this morning's briefing. I know that Shannon has sent along the aerial maps that we showed or tried to show here on the board. So you have received those. I also think that we had, and Shannon has corrected this as well, but the Jeb Scott boat ramp, the proper name there was the Paper Mills Trail and Miller Park Boat Launch. The address was correct at 501 Lisbon Street. The Jump Scott is a little bit further down the river, apparently, and we certainly like and appreciate everybody working with us to make sure that we had the proper location, the proper terminology for that. And other additional updates, the boat launch search of the river, the Androscoggin, they're still out there right now, and they'll be there as long as they can based on the light. And as we mentioned earlier, we're talking about sonars and grid searches and things of that nature. That's time intensive. It's taken them a while to work through there. They want to make sure they do it right. So we're not going to finish that search this evening. I would be surprised if you ever saw divers in the water overall. But tomorrow we'll have additional dive resources available to us from out of state, as well as some additional in-state teams. So again, we'll discuss that a little bit at 10 o'clock tomorrow, but no surprises. We expect that to go over, and that we'll have some assets there tomorrow. They did a bunch of flyovers this morning, as I mentioned. They did the sonar searches, some side, some ROV, and we'll be back on that tomorrow. The bar scene itself, they continue to do their on-scene investigation there, as well as at the bowling alley. They did check those wood lines. They may be back in there tomorrow as well, but that is progressing as expected. And I think another major piece of updates for you now is to talk about the shelter-in-place order and where that's going effective immediately. And I'm not a big reader of orders, but I think this is important that you hear this directly from a couple different sources. We're going to put out a release. There's going to be a cell phone geofence release to some folks. We've used that a couple times already during the active shooter as a warning and otherwise. But the shelter-in-place order is rescinded, except hunting is prohibited in the towns of Lewiston, Lisbon, Bowdoin, and Monmouth, beginning Saturday, 10/28/24, until further notice. The state police continue to search in Lewiston, Lisbon, Bowdoin, and Monmouth for the suspect, Robert Card, and recommend individuals remain vigilant. Businesses may choose to open or remain closed. Commissioner Camuso from IF&W is here to help us answer any additional questions about that hunting piece. It was asked this morning, and it was a good question, and I told you at that time that we were working on an answer for that. And what that means is that the general shelter in place has been rescinded. Specifically, hunting, again, is prohibited in those 4 towns and those 4 towns only. And it's important that I mention that because the rest of the state is allowed to continue with their resident-only day on Saturday, tomorrow. And what does that mean? That means that there are going to be communities that hear gunshots from time to time because they're going to be hunting. So we would ask everybody to use caution in that and not think that every one of those gunshots is directly regarding this particular crisis situation, this investigation. So clearly, if they think, if they're suspicious, if they're concerned, they can certainly call their local agencies. But I would ask them to think about that, where they're located, when do they hear that? If they're 150 miles north, do they need to call their 911 center and create a response? And I think I would say no to that, unless they have another set of facts, a fact pattern that would believe them that there's a direct connection between that gunfire and what they've heard to this point. So we had mentioned why we made that decision initially because of the crisis and the situation that we had. Those 4 towns in particular, clearly with Lewiston and the 2 tragic situations here, the 2 locations we already talked about. And then you have Lisbon with the boat launch, Bowdoin where the suspect lived. In Monmouth, there's other family connections in that particular area as well. So this is not to say that the crisis is over, the emergency is done, we can go about our lives as life is good. We want our folks, we want our residents to remain vigilant and to pay attention to what we share for information. I again focus on what we share is in the Department of Public Safety in the city of Lewiston, because we continue to see a lot of information from a lot of different places that is far from accurate. I would also say in that regard, when we say that we're going to meet you here at 10, we're going to meet you here at 10. And when we say we're going to notify you, we are going to notify you in the afternoon if we're going to get together and what time that is. I just encourage you to believe that until I prove you wrong, and I won't. And I say that because we've heard some other stuff. There's going to be a press conference at 1 o'clock. And then our PIO, who's incredibly busy, gets 100 emails that says, is it going to be 1 o'clock or is it going to be this? And you've got a job to do. I get it. And we're trying to help you do your job. And if you could help us do our job, that would be greatly, greatly appreciated. So that is some of those pieces for updates from what we worked on this morning. A couple of additional things. Neighborhood canvases, as an example. I did not speak to that. So we talked about large deployments of officers in various locations. What would that look like? Neighborhood canvases could be a couple of officers knocking on a door. And that's going to be happening at various locations around this particular area in multiple towns. Again, if somebody's using their own common sense and they say that doesn't seem right, then sure, call. But you could have 2 uniformed officers or 2 officers with clearly displayed badges jumping out of a marked car to come talk to you as detectives. There was a question this morning around arrival times at the 2 locations, and we had done some research on that, which was hot off the presses walking out the door to come here today. So spare time, as we had mentioned earlier, that initial 911 call occurred at 6:56 p.m. And by the CAD system or the computer-aided dispatch system, so somebody calls in on a radio and they says, now I'm out at that location. The first Lewiston officer arrived based on that system at 7 p.m., so 4 minutes later. The reality there, however, is that there were 4 plainclothes police officers that were shooting on the range in that general area. They hear that call come in, and they're walking into the bar or rather the bowling alley in about a minute and a half. So they don't have radios. They weren't in uniform. They hear it as they're at the range. They respond to the address immediately, and then they address the threat and clear the building. For that same location, right, spare time, as an example, you have Lewiston. It's a self-contained police department. They work with everybody. So it's not uncommon to see the Maine State Police in town, but they don't have specific areas to patrol. Calls came in to dispatch centers for the Department of Public Safety that would control the Maine State Police, as an example, at 6:57. So a minute-ish later, and we didn't have necessarily troopers right inside the town. So 11 minutes later, our first trooper arrives, which is not uncommon, actually, and that's a pretty good response time, considering it's an urban atmosphere and troopers aren't here. The second set of calls, as we've discussed, came in at 7:08. So this is the bar and grill. And the first Lewiston officer is responding there at 19:13 or 7:13 p.m., so 5 minutes later. And then really it becomes exponential after that. As an example, should have mentioned this earlier, but spare time, a minute after those initial officers respond, 8 more are there. Now we're saying now everybody's starting to roll in at about the same time, and about 10 officers are responding to the bar and grill immediately thereafter. You got the first folks, and then people are just showing up from the police department and other locations. And that particular calls for service for the Maine State Police through Department of Public Safety dispatches, we got that second call at 7:10, about 2 minutes later than the Lewiston Center received it. And we had officers responding and arriving 3 minutes later. So why is that? They're already flying to the first address, and now we got a second call, and now they're diverting to that second call. So it's obviously they're in town, and they're running hard to that location. So those are the arrival times that I was asked about earlier today. I think based on the list that I made this morning, I think that's all we had for information. And I'll just call that kind of updates and follow-ups, things that I knew you were asking. There were some additional questions from the general public, which has been good for us to receive those through these, right? They get a chance to see stuff and then they reach out and say, what does this mean? We had a bunch of people reach out about that shelter in place and what does that mean and what should I do and what does that look like? And rather than answer those through conversations with city staff, city leadership, police chiefs, we decided to rescind that order again, but recommend that people remain vigilant as they move forward. So I do appreciate them reaching out, and all of that contact has something to do with our ultimate decision. Where do we go from here? So with that in mind, that's the information that I was asked and the information that I can update. We do have, I believe, the suspect picture up here as another piece. And the reason that we did this is because it's been quite some time. We've seen that photo, and you have a bunch of different photos. This, in fact, has more of the physical description of his height and weight, and his more official hair and eye color. You could guess at that based on some of the photos that you see, but why do that if we can directly give you that information? So if you could freshen up any material that you have there, it does again show that brown hooded sweatshirt and dark colored cargo pants that are in the photo that we had released earlier, which showed him walking in to spare time with that firearm. So I think that's the information that I wanted to get out to you today. I appreciate you coming back or holding on. I know you have long days and long nights. So that piece, you were going to be around anyway, I'm sure. But I am, again, happy to try to take some questions and answers. The chief is here as well, but we did want to keep this tight from an operational standpoint. So, yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, sure. So officers are required to qualify a certain number of times a year, right? So in this particular instance, the officers are in plain clothes. They're shooting at a range right around the corner. The call comes in, they hear that, and they're going to respond, which just speaks to when these things happen, everybody's going. You could be a detective, the chief's bailing out of the station, you could be wherever, everybody goes. So being Lewiston officers, they go, we know where that is. Everybody gets in the car and they immediately go to spare time to help in any way they can, not knowing that in fact they're going to be the closest there and the first out. So that cuts almost 2.5 minutes off the original or the initial uniform police officer's response. And that's not uncommon from a police standpoint. Sometimes you got months where you're thinking, boy, I'm right around the corner when all this stuff happens. And sometimes I'm on the other side of the city when other stuff happens. We're very, very lucky that the officers were that close because I think you save lives with time responses. And in an urban atmosphere, depending on where everybody is and how busy the night is, that response could have been much longer than that. Yes, sir.
Have there been any credible sightings of the suspect by either law enforcement or the public since the shooting took place?
Yeah, so we have, again, 530 plus tips and leads that have come in. Some of those have been sightings, some of those have been, and I would say as simple as, but hey, I've got a vacant house that's in this location. I own a barn that I'm afraid to go to. There's something over here that concerns me. So those things run the gamut. And I'm also going to use that opportunity to the FBI supervisory agent in charge, Jody Cohen, who has been with us during these press conferences. We gave that digital video information out this morning. There's already well over 100 entries in that system. So that means you're putting that information out and the general public is grabbing hold of that, wanting to be involved and sending that information in. So I thank you for that. And we certainly thank the FBI for their assistance with that kind of material. So we've got all kinds of, if somebody may say, somebody.
Has law enforcement seen him in the last 2 days?
We have not. Law enforcement has not seen him in the last 2 days. But again, in that stack of that 500 plus, you may have somebody that says, hey, we see somebody that looks like that. So we have not, but go ahead, ma'am. Yeah, I cannot, and I'm not going to speak to the note itself. I acknowledge the fact that a note existed this morning, but I'm not going to get into exactly what it contained. But, sir?
Sir, you said that the officers, plainclothes officers who responded, addressed the threat, cleared the building. Can you explain what happened there?
Sure. When I say address the threat, they're going in the door, addressing an active shooter. So they're going in prepared to do whatever they need to do to make that scene safe. On that particular time, the suspect is no longer there. They're going in as if they were. So the first thing you do is you go in and clear that location, make sure it's safe, and then you start working with victims and triaging people and trying to make sure that you're getting additional units there as fast as possible. So, yes, sir.
I wonder if when the officers arrived at the second scene, the suspect was still there, or whether by the time the first responders had arrived, the suspect had already left. And secondly to that, outside of the area of Lewiston and the surrounding community, can you talk about the work that's going on further afield, and the suspicion that we might have been able to flee a bit further than that, potentially even outside the state?
Yeah, sure. So the suspect was not at the second location when the officers arrived. As we discussed this morning, we showed those 3 maps as specific areas we knew we were definitely going to be working in. And then we've also cleared other areas that are farther afield. Somebody may again say, there's a barn over there, there's an outbuilding over there, there's some family property that somebody's uncle owns, and can you check that? So as those things come in, some of those are kind of on the checklist to begin with, and then some come in real time. Because as those leads come in, we do look at those and then we farm them back out to either tactical units that are looking on that apprehension side or investigative units that can go out and do additional interviews. Well, at this point, we are cognizant of all possibilities. We're not closing off anything because we want to make sure that we're being as comprehensive as we can with these particular searches. Yes, ma'am?
We noticed earlier the most expensive one was the presence in Maine. What can you tell us about this?
In what town?
Durham.
Durham. Okay. Yeah. So, and that's a situation where I heard that on the radio. Somebody had reached out to say that somebody may ask that question today. So we did look at that. There was a location there on a street in Durham where there were 2 911 hang-up calls. 911 hang-up calls happen on a regular basis, depending on where they are. You may go, okay, wait a second. And then we had a second call. And then there was a sheriff's deputy that responded to the scene and then ultimately did not answer their radio, right? So you go 911 hang up, 911 hang up. Okay, wait a second. The officer that responded is not talking. That could be for a lot of different reasons. Again, based on the circumstances, we're certainly concerned about something like that. So officers did respond, make sure that he was safe, the scene was safe, and they moved on. So there was no direct connection to the suspect in this scenario, at least in today's call for service. Yes, sir.
Have you at this point secured or gone to all the residents, every place where he had lived previously? Have you gone to each one of those homes? And additionally, at this point, have you executed all available search warrants at the houses,
Yep.
car, social media, electronics. Have you put all of those search warrants in, or there's still other?
There's still a lot of work to be done around the search warrant side of the house, just based on workload alone. I don't know, however, have we searched every house that he's had over the last amount of time? Certainly the ones that most recent. There's a Bowdoin connection, which caused a bit of a stir last night. That was a location we were concerned about. Our reality from a homicide investigation, as an example, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you may have done 1 or 2 search warrants. Based on electronic devices and everything else, you could do up to 30 search warrants on one. So this kind of situation, clearly there's going to be a lot of affidavits, a lot of work to be done around that. So we're working with the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Attorney General's Office. Federal entities are assisting with these warrants. That's an all hands on deck. You just never know, I'm going to open this device and that's going to be the one, right? So we farmed that out to make sure we're making as much progress as possible. And I'm sorry for waiting. Go ahead. Mm. Yeah, so I think that goes in 2 different directions, right? We certainly have a lot of resources coming for the river tomorrow, because it would be nicer if it's sunnier, you can get a better look into the water. So that's one angle. If it's colder, there's an argument to be made that your thermo style of equipment, where you're looking for body temperatures or heat signatures, may work better in that scenario. So it does definitely vary. If it's cold for the suspect, it's certainly cold for our officers as well, and all those different things. We're certainly prepared and willing to do all those things, but that's where we're at. So yes, sir.
Discuss some of the reasoning behind why you removed the shelter-in-place orders in these 4 towns where you acknowledged you're still actively searching. And secondly, do we know how many weapons Card has in his possession?
The second question is no, I don't know how many he has or had. If there are weapons within that residence, that'll be part of the search warrant and counting those things out. And the decision to release that or rescind that shelter-in-place order is something that we've discussed internally as command staff members at the CP, and saying, okay, we're looking at pros and cons, right? We've got communities that are locked down, that are shut down. There are families and schools and pharmacies and all those things. So we knew going in, and have acknowledged that repeatedly, that we know that can have a negative impact on people. So the other side of that is we had very pointed threats early on, reference to these locations, and nothing specific since then. So you have to look at that, and you have to do the math on that and say, so are we more comfortable? Are we doing more harm than good by keeping people away from these clinics and their doctors and in schools? And while this is still absolutely a dangerous situation without question, we've got to make recommendations and ask the people that we serve, ask the people that we protect, to be vigilant, to pay attention, to listen to what we have to say. If you see something, say something. Because in most cases, you're like, I don't like that. That looks strange. We can feel that, especially when you live in neighborhoods, right? That you live there, you're comfortable with that. That car is wrong coming down my driveway at this particular time of the day. What is going on? So that we don't come to those decisions to go into the order or come out lightly by any stretch of the imagination. But we do appreciate all the input from everybody about what does that mean and how it's impacted me as a person, right? So I appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Is there any reason to believe that you may have obtained another vehicle since you already found this car, or may have gotten on the boat and gone down the river?
All possibilities are open to us. I don't have anything specific reference to that particular question. Next steps, where did he go after that, and what was he in or not? Which is why we have feelers out in all directions. Is that a possibility? Sure. Is the river a possibility? Sure. We're going to continue to work those things until we're comfortable that those things have mitigated to the best of our ability, right? Because some of these locations we serve a search warrant on doesn't mean we're done, right? We may actually go back and continue a search and new information and go back and check a location again. So all of those things are absolutely available. Sir, right here. That's a good question that I don't know the answer to. I know that the Attorney General's office told us this afternoon that they were trying to complete the rest of those warrants in a timely fashion. Now that those individuals had been identified and the families notified. I'll have that answer for you tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock for sure. And right here, ma'am, sorry.
Yes, and 2 questions. The first is whether you can confirm that police found the gun in Carter's car, the one that the suspect's car when it was discarded.
Mhm.
And secondly, I was wondering if you
Yeah, sure. So we won't speak to evidence, specific evidence. Did you find something here? Did you find something there? I completely understand why the question is valid, but it's not something we're prepared to talk about, certainly this early on in an investigation. I can tell you that I've been in contact with all of our border states or country. New Brunswick reached out to the governor. The commissioners from our border states reached out to me immediately the day of, and have reached out to me multiple times since then. Again, a lot of their officers are with us at this point, right? New Hampshire is up here, Massachusetts is up here, you name it on the federal side of the house, they are here. So everybody's really working hard on that side of it. There's no expectation at all that there's going to be some kind of a border checkpoint scenario. But I'm going to take one more call, one more question here from you, ma'am. Oh, absolutely.
Chief, for members of law enforcement, especially the Lewiston and displacement community, can you talk about what it's been like to do this investigation when they may have close connections to some of the victims?
It's been very difficult, I can tell you that for certain. Seeing these pictures come up on the board, I know a couple of them myself. There are many law enforcement officials that I know some of these victims, and it's certainly very challenging. Try to go into a situation very objectively and, do a very thorough job knowing that you know this person that it's affected, or, a family member or a friend. Very difficult. I can tell you that all of the police officers I know from the area remain very professional at all times. And we press on and we get the job done.
Some of the complexities, are you dealing with 50 showcasing hundreds? What are some of the complexities?
Yeah, again, the state police has the lead on this investigation. I can't comment on that. I can tell you that in scenes that I've investigated personally or that I've been to, it happens a lot. It takes a long time to process these scenes. It's nothing that happens in a quick manner, like Mike mentioned earlier this morning. It doesn't happen in an hour and the case is solved. These things take time.
I'm not prepared to answer that question, but I do appreciate that. And as I mentioned, thank you very much for being here. We really do appreciate that. And we'll continue to strengthen this partnership, get out as much information as we can. So have a nice evening. Thank you. 10 o'clock tomorrow. And it will be here unless we change the venue.
All right. So, not a lot of information, but some things that I didn't know. They did initially name all of the victims, all 18, and that I believe was important and should have been mentioned first because, again, it is about the victims, and hopefully they find this shooter very soon. So someone had asked in chat about the note, and I did find this article. This was from, let's see, WMUR9 ABC, which is in Manchester, New Hampshire. Suspected Maine mass shooter's court record includes prior arrest, divorce. So we'll take a look at this video.
Frustrated with...
Oh, dang it. Hold on. I was trying to make the window bigger and...
Cable internet? It's time to cancel cable and move on to something better. Fidium Fiber Internet delivers more. Sign up today and get twice the speed of cable for the same price. Plus, lock your rate in for a year. Order today.
Well, we checked the New Hampshire court system both on a superior and district level, and we could not find any records for Robert Card here in the Granite State. However, we did find some information about Card in Maine. Now, court documents show the only criminal record for Card in Maine was an arrest in April of 2007 for operating under the influence. Card pleaded guilty to that charge. The other records pertaining to Card in Maine, in the Maine court system, only pertain to a 2007 divorce. We know Card was married 2 years prior. He shares a son with his ex-wife. Their divorce order was amended in 2013 to include shared parental rights and responsibilities of their child. Now, according to ABC News, investigators found a note at Card's home yesterday that was addressed to his son. Sources describe it as a suicide note that contained rantings as well as personal information like bank account details. Law enforcement officials also say that Card's family is cooperating with authorities as this search continues. Reporting in the newsroom, I'm Tim Callery, WMUR News 9.
Okay. So that was just something I had found in relation to the question someone had in chat. And give me 1 second, this started playing again. So I did want to share this video. I had seen this yesterday, and it has some interviews with some of the survivors. So I will be doing a live tomorrow on the victims. Probably, actually, I will plan to talk about the victims in this case after the 10 o'clock press conference tomorrow morning. So I will be scheduling a live for probably 9:45 a.m. tomorrow morning. And then you may have noticed I did change my live about Matthew Shepard until tomorrow night because, one, I'm exhausted, and two, I hadn't realized there was going to be a press conference at 5. So I wanted to be sure to have time to do Matthew right. Do right by Matthew, I should say.
The intense scene outside a residence tied to the suspect in the deadly shooting rampage in Maine tonight. After more than 24 hours of an urgent manhunt to track down Robert Card, the man wanted in the mass shooting that left 18 dead, authorities zeroing in on this house, SWAT teams descending, helicopters overhead.
It is standard procedure to try to get the person to engage with you. And then
And I also did see that Jennifer Coffendorfer also had, there was I don't remember where the video was or where I saw it, but she also said that that is standard operating procedure where the FBI, says, come out with your hands up, repeatedly. And I believe they had done that at least 2 locations, if not more. I had only heard about 2 as of yesterday.
a dialogue, you've at least increased your chances that you can end this peacefully.
However, Card was not found. It's the latest in the all-out effort to find the person authorities say committed the senseless violence that rocked Maine and the nation.
To respond to the town of Lewiston for 2 active shooter locations, all available units.
On Wednesday night, a gunman opened fire with an assault-style rifle, first at a bowling alley and then a bar. 2 places authorities say he may have had personal connection to.
This city did not deserve this terrible assault on its citizens, on its peace of mind, on its sense of security. No city does, no state, no people.
The suspect, a 40-year-old divorced father who was an Army reservist with a history of mental health struggles, raising questions about missed signals.
If sometimes people say they never see this coming, with Robert Card, people clearly saw troubling signs. His family painted a picture of a troubled individual with a history of mental illness.
After the shooting, authorities say the suspect fled, triggering a frantic search.
Mr. Card is considered armed and dangerous. and police advise that Maine people should not approach him under any circumstances.
Parts of Maine like a ghost town. Residents
I agree, Karen. Some strange vibes to this day. Lots of heaviness. I agree. A very heavy situation.
order to shelter in place, schools and many stores closed. The grief for those who lost loved ones, palpable.
Your whole body, everything goes out of you. Your heart goes flip-flop, and it feels like there's a vice in you. Your head can't take it, and you just feel like you're going to blow up.
My colleague David Muir talking to Leroy Walker, his son Joseph, killed in the shooting. Leroy, a local councilman, says state police told the family his son was a hero who tried to stop the gunman.
It's just hard. I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
I'm sorry.
The massacre began just before 7 p.m. on Tuesday night at a local bowling alley called Just in Time, formerly called Spare Time.
Well, we were inside and it's another night of bowling, and out of nowhere, he just came in and there was a loud pop.
2 active shooter locations, all available units.
We have an active shooter. We have multiple injuries.
There was a youth program underway, so there were kids bowling with their parents, many of them, when the first shots were fired.
Megan Hutchinson and her 10-year-old daughter Zoe were there.
Between the lanes, there's some swinging doors, like where they keep all the mechanical stuff out back. We barricaded in there, and another parent was in the room with me. She had a phone. She called 911.
Zoe's leg grazed by a bullet.
I never thought I'd grow up.
And I did watch this last night, and this little girl, what she says, it's so sad that children these days have these instinctual thoughts based on what's been happening in our country. Like, she shouldn't have to worry about this happening.
Up and get a bullet in my leg, and it's just like why? Like, why do people do this? I was more worried about, like, am I gonna live? Am I gonna make it out of here? Like, what's gonna happen? Are the cops gonna come?
Tammy Asselin and her 10-year-old daughter Tony were also at the bowling alley last night when the shooting started.
I started to walk towards that sound when I heard a second one and started seeing people running, and some people running down the bowling alley, the slippery bowling alley. Unfortunately, some of them didn't make it.
To me, it was traumatizing because I just saw this dude sitting at the bar and all this.
Ugh. And I can't imagine adults, let alone children, having to see or experience this type of terror.
All of a sudden, I see blood fly everywhere, and he fell to the ground, and he wasn't moving.
It didn't feel real. It didn't feel real at all.
Trapped, seconds turned to minutes. Minutes turned into what felt like hours.
We were stuck in the corner, basically sitting ducks.
They narrowly escaped, but lost their cousin.
Her name was Trisha, and she was a fun-loving, she was bubbly, she was always ready for some fun. She actually works at the bowling alley too, so we would see her when we would go.
The second shooting scene, a pool hall and bar, Shemengi's, is about 4 miles from the bowling alley. People reportedly enjoying a night of cornhole. From her hospital bed, Jennifer Zanka telling us she was having dinner with friends when the shooting began.
When I turned around, we all turned around and realized what was happening. We dropped to the ground. And that's when I think I was shot in the arm.
She had been shot, and this retired nurse still escaped through the back door.
I kept my hand on my arm like a tourniquet because it was bleeding pretty heavily. And I went to hide behind the dumpster. There was another gentleman there. but I knew I needed to get help.
Rushed to the hospital, a doctor she used to work with, now operating on her.
I was one of the lucky.
And I'm a baffled. Very good point. Not only this violence, but look at other countries' bombings. Children watching the skies for bombs. I just cannot. I agree.
If the bullet had been in either direction, I definitely would not have survived.
Robin Payne lives down the street from the bar and grill, her camera capturing the chaos unfolding at the crime scene in real time. Payne sheltered in place.
So when I found out this was an active shooter event, I was very worried. I'm a single parent, and our house is so close where I could see everything happening.
The Lewiston resident shocked a mass shooting hitting so close to home, a state where mass shootings are almost unheard of. Just last year, the state reporting 29 homicides, 15 of them connected to domestic violence.
Lewiston, Maine is a hardworking, blue-collar kind of town. The people have a lot of grit and strength and determination, but they're also very close-knit, and they come together in times of tragedy.
Last night, authorities found a white Subaru belonging to the suspect in Lisbon, Maine, miles from the Lewiston crime scene at a boat launch. Inside, a firearm recovered. Card owns a boat. Authorities not ruling out that he could have used a boat to escape. The Coast Guard is searching the Kennebec River. Investigators also finding a suicide note today at Card's home written to his son.
Law enforcement won't share the rest of it, but they basically stated that there are ramblings, which would totally fit based on what we know about this suspect. Probably rantings and ravings about what he doesn't like or who he perceives would be his enemies.
The Army confirming to ABC News, Card has been a reservist since December 2002. Card, a sergeant first class who never deployed for combat. This summer, Card was deployed to Camp Smith Training Center in upstate New York to help support summer training for West Point cadets.
Some of his fellow soldiers reported him to be behaving erratically. It appears he may have been making threats, we're told, against some of his fellow soldiers. That got him an intervention with military authorities. He was also in treatment for at least 2 weeks this past summer based on hearing voices in his head and threatening to kill a National Guard base in Saco, Maine, where he may have also had military ties.
Back in Maine, a community in mourning.
And it makes you wonder, I know he was released, but I'm wondering under what pretenses. I feel, those types of threats are pretty serious. And I'm curious as to what treatment he may have or may not have received.
At least 8 of the 18 victims have been identified. They include a youth bowling coach, a mother who rushed to call 911, and the manager of the bar and restaurant where so many lives were lost. Those who survived still reeling from the tragedy.
I'm just glad everybody here is okay. But now it's the process of dealing with what she and I saw. I'm just thankful that we made it out.
Hi, everyone. George.
Okay. Yeah, Wise Angel, that's something we don't know. I'm sure that much will come out, in the coming days. I think I'm going to show one more video. Let me just go to my watch later. There was another one that I watched. Doesn't look like it's probably on my playlist. So I'm just going to play this video again where it talks about the victims who have been identified, and then I will just give some closing thoughts.
members of a tight-knit community group for the deaf, a father and his 14-year-old son, and a volunteer bowling instructor who shielded children from gunfire are among the victims killed in the senseless rampage. Authorities are not releasing the names of the victims, but their family members have been confirming their deaths.
KTLA's Mary Beth McDade is live in the news center with more on what.
And as we know, they did release the names of all 18 victims at this evening's press conference. And this will just talk about some of those who had been identified prior to.
What we know about the victims tonight. Mary Beth.
Mike and Jer, 18 people lost their lives in a matter of minutes at two different locations, a bar and a bowling alley. Well, tonight we're learning more about who these victims are, several of whom tried to stop the shooter from killing others.
My son was a hero, took a long blade knife and tried to go after the gunman to stop him from shooting anybody else.
Leroy Walker is talking about his son, Joseph. Joseph was the longtime bar manager at Chimangi's Bar and Grill, one of two Lewiston locations. The shooter carried out his rampage that left 18 dead, 16.
And so these are the photos that they had shown on the press conference. And so you have, actually, let me get rid of that closed captioning. You have Arthur Strout, Michael Deloriers II, Max Hathaway, Trisha Eslin, Peyton Brewer Ross, Ron Morin, Billy Brackett, Bob Violet, Joseph Walker, Tom Conrad, Josh Seal, Brian McFarlane, Steve Azella, Jason Walker, Billy Young, and his son, Aaron Young.
Have been identified by family and friends.
The gunman shot him and killed him.
Leroy says he's not surprised by his son's actions.
I am proud of him. He was brought up that way. It was always to defend himself and his family, and these people have been his family for a lot of years now, working at Chimangi's.
40-year-old Brian McFarlane, Stephen Vozella, and Bill Brackett were also killed at Chimangi's while participating in a cornhole tournament for deaf adults. Peyton Brewer Ross, a pipe fitter and new father, also died while playing cornhole. Josh Seeley, 36-year-old father of 4 and sign language interpreter, will be remembered for always putting his family first. 38-year-old Max Hathaway was at the bar playing pool. His wife and toddler had left early when the baby became fussy. And 44-year-old Arthur Strout was also playing pool. He leaves behind 3 children. Ron Morin will be remembered as an upstanding man with a lot of joy in his heart. Prior to the bar, the mass shooter walked into a nearby bowling alley, which was packed with kids and families, and opened fire. His first victim was 76-year-old Bob Violet. Bob had set up a youth bowling league and was in the middle of teaching children when the shooter walked in. 53-year-old Trisha Aslin worked at the bowling alley part-time, but that night her brother says she was bowling for fun. She was killed when she ran to the counter to call 911. Michael Deslaries was out for a night of bowling with friends and family. Among them, one of his dearest friends, Jason Walker. They made sure their wives and several children were undercover. And
I did see, I believe there was an interview with 2 men who were that were with them. And that was a hard one to watch as well.
Charged the gunman. Tom Conrad, the manager of the bowling alley, also died trying to subdue the shooter. He leaves behind a 9-year-old daughter. Among the others killed, Bill and Aaron Young, a father and 14-year-old son, out together, enjoying a night of bowling. Well, authorities say that there were also 13 other people injured. 3 of them remain in critical condition tonight. For now, reporting live here in News Center, Mary Beth McDade will send back to you guys in the studio.
All right. So just a couple of videos about the survivors and the victims. I will, like I said, I will be live tomorrow with more survivor and stories of those who lost their lives. I will also be live tomorrow at 6:30 with the story of Matthew Shepard. So I hope to see all of you then. If not, have a great rest of your night. And until next time, I will see you all on the flip side.